South Africa is looking to host another Football World Cup, and this time around it's the Women's World Cup in 2027, and they will be up against some strong competition. Now, to talk to us about this and the bid that South Africa is going to be putting together, we've gotten the chairperson, Tumi Dlamini. Good morning, Tumi. Thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Thank you so much. It's
Looking
a pleasure.
very nice in your banyana, yellow and green.
Supporting banyana.
So, Tumi, let's talk about this upcoming World Cup bid that you've got going on. And perhaps let's just talk to the fact that you'll be going up against joint bids from other countries. I mean, the joint bid between Belgium, Netherlands and Germany, another one from the USA and Mexico. And we're seeing the US and Mexico now with the upcoming Men's World Cup that will be coming up. Obviously, for them, they feel that's an advantage. What is it that is going to give the South African bid an edge over these other joint bids?
Well, first of all, thank you so much for the opportunity to chat with you. Well, I think, South Africa does have an edge over the other countries. Of course, it's a competition, anyone can win it, but we believe that, we hosted the 2010 World Cup and it was the best, according to FIFA, that's ever been hosted. And so that in itself speaks to our track record of being able to host some of the major sporting events. We've since hosted a number of them. And importantly, though, is the vision of FIFA, which is to enlarge and promote women's football. And if that's their vision, then Africa is the place where they would want to make sure that Africa is included and make sure that African women are inspired to play more football, because we're seeing a lot of development around women's football in other continents and less so in Africa. So we believe that the need to promote women's football participation, not only just on the field as players, but also as coaches, but also in the boardroom, in the administration of football.
And I mean, we look at the women's game and we see how much it's grown, not only just in terms of the quality of the players and the competition, the stadium attendance has increased, the commercialization of women's football as well. Let's talk about how that has come in strides since the first World Cup we saw in 1991, because we've got one currently underway now, and we've seen the attendance in New Zealand as well as Australia.
Absolutely, you're quite right. I mean, since 1991, the current World Cup that we see in New Zealand and Australia, the attendance is very good. The stadiums are full, but also the sponsors, the commercial partners are coming on board because they're realizing that this is a growth area for them. So it's a win-win, So it's becoming a major business. So, and which is partly why we're putting this bid forward as South Africa, because we recognize what women's football could potentially mean for commercial companies and for also making a contribution towards growth and development economically. So we want to say, South Africa, just like many other countries, has just come through COVID-19 pandemic, and part of the rebuilding and the recovery process is to make sure that economically we support small businesses and large businesses, of course, and this is a growth area. So it makes sense for us to actually go for this World Cup bid so that we could promote the host cities and businesses in the country.
And that sounds very beautiful, but from your position now as the chairperson, let's perhaps speak to some of the stereotypes that you need to try and break down and get through when it comes to putting this bid together, because I think we heard in 2010 when we were reading articles from other parts of the world about the crime rates in South Africa is this, people can't even, and I mean, some of those things you looked at and you said this is so far from the truth and the actual reality on the ground. So what are some of these stereotypes that you're trying to break through, and how you're putting your bid together as well as your presentation?
Yeah, I was very fortunate to have been part of the 2010 World Cup, so I'm very much aware of some of the issues, particularly Afro-pessimism that we saw coming through leading up to the World Cup. But of course, once the World Cup was hosted, we saw a very different Africa and a different South Africa being portrayed. And so the work of promoting and shifting stereotypes and shifting people's minds around what Africa represents in the world is ongoing work.
Yes.
And so we managed to do part of the work in 2010, and since then there are many other institutions and events that have been hosted in order to make sure that we shift. So this World Cup 2027 is also, we're hoping, going to shift some of those stereotypes. And it's not going to end in 2027,
Yes.
you know. Unfortunately, this is where we find ourselves as Africa, but we also know all of our good stories. So here's the platform for us to promote ourselves, to speak and showcase the good stories of Africa, showcase the infrastructure that we have, and to ensure that we have foreign direct investors coming into our country, but also the continent at large, because we are, after all, bidding for this World Cup as an African World Cup and not just as a South African World Cup.
And I see, and I mentioned your colours that you're wearing, so representative of Banyana in South Africa. You get to jet off to Australia and New Zealand as well
Yes.
in a
Lucky
short
me.
while. Very lucky you. We wish we could be in your shoes. Talk to us about the presentations that you're going to be having there while you are in Australia and New Zealand, and what the focus and the main point of that is.
Sure. So FIFA will be hosting an observer program. So it's a workshop in which they've invited all of the bidding nations, all 4 of them, South Africa, Brazil, the joint nations of Mexico, USA, and of course the Europeans, Belgium, Netherlands, and Germany. And the objective of that workshop is to outline some of the requirements. You know, they have issued a number of building guidelines, and most of which are new, you know, which didn't exist in 2010. So this workshop is to ensure that everyone understands fully what's expected of each bidding nation, and also to have a platform to ask some questions. So we do hope that South Africa will put a very strong case forward, although of course it's not intended for any of the nations to compete
Yes.
at that level, you know, at that time. But we are going to put forward a presentation, showcase our host cities and some of the potential stadiums. We do have all of the infrastructure in place, so that's what the objective will be. And we will have, of course, an opportunity to then meet the other bidding nations and see what they've got up their sleeves.
Tumi, thank you so much for your time this morning, and good luck. We wish you all the best, and we're crossing fingers that 2027 Philip will be here again.
Philip's coming back. Iyabuya. Thank you so much.
That is, of course, Tumi Dlamini. She is the chairperson, the lady right on the forefront of South Africa's 2027 World Cup bid for the FIFA Women's World Cup.